I went shopping one quiet night last year. It was later at night, but my local grocery store was still open, and they're always open pretty late. I think it was about 11 p.m., and what I liked about shopping at that time was how quiet things were. On that night in particular, I saw a couple of other shoppers, but not many at all. The store was rather large, and had just about any kind of groceries you could want. I started out near the produce, and then started going down one aisle after another with my cart. There were a lot of things that I needed to get, but with the store being nearly empty, I was able to shop rather fast. I got into one of the middle aisles in the store, and I don't remember exactly what was in it, but I had been shopping for probably 20 minutes and was getting close to being done. I was the only person in that aisle, and the store was quiet. Just a soft volume of music played across the store speakers. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud crash from the next aisle over from mine. I decided to walk over and check out what happened out of curiosity. It had sounded like a bunch of things falling off the shelf. I left my cart there where it was and walked over to the next aisle over. When I got there, I first noticed somebody sprinting out of the aisle at the other end. That it then went out of sight within a second, and I only saw the back side of it, but it appeared to be a man. Then I saw the damage that he had caused. A bunch of items laid across the aisle on the ground. It was like somebody had pushed them all onto the floor. Whoever had done it was gone, so I took it upon myself to put the items back on the shelf. It didn't take too long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. There was probably about 15 items or so that had been knocked over. This had been a pretty strange thing, but when I was done, I just returned to my cart in the next aisle over. Then I continued my shopping. Like I said, I was close to being done, and I just had to get a few things from the dairy department. I made my way over there, seeing only one other customer along the way. When I arrived at the dairy, I was getting yogurt and noticed another customer. It was a man, wearing jeans and a gray shirtie. He was standing around in the far back corner of the store. I didn't pay much attention and kept on what I was doing. But then something crazy happened. I saw the man moving towards this display that the store had of a drink product. The guy walked right over to it and then shoved the display, causing it to fall over. All of the cans of the drink fell down, and it caused another loud noise. Drinks went everywhere, but luckily none of them broke open or spilled. I found this to be really strange, and also realized that this was probably the same man who had caused the other mess in the other aisle. I figured it would be a good idea to stay away from him. After the man knocked the display over, he walked at a fast pace in another direction. I finished up getting the last few items that I was going to get, and in that time, I saw an employee of the store walk over and see the mess. He saw me as the only other customer in the area and asked me if I saw what had happened. I told him the story and mentioned the incident in the other aisle as well. The employee shook his head and then walked over to go clean things up. I went into another direction to go check out. I got to the empty checkout lane at one of the 3 check lanes still open in the store. Soon I had paid for everything and was on my way. I left the store and headed to my car in the quiet parking lot. When I had made it fairly close to my vehicle, I started to hear footsteps behind me. They were moving at a faster pace, so I turned around to see, and when I did, I saw the same guy who had knocked over all the stuff inside the store. He was walking aggressively in my direction. It seemed as though he wanted something with me, but I didn't know what. I kept walking to my car, but there was no way I was going to make it before he got to me. When I had just about reached the back side of my car, the footsteps were right there, so I stopped and turned around. Now I was face to face with the man. He stopped and stood there across from me, the only thing between us being my shopping cart. I said hi to the man, not knowing what else to do. The guy responded by demanding the keys to my car. He told me that he needed them. This really surprised me, and I told the guy no. The guy then reached forward and grabbed my shopping cart from the sides. He then proceeded to knock the shopping cart over, spilling all of the grocery bags onto the pavement. As the cart fell over, I turned and ran for the front door of my car. The man had actually created a bit of an obstacle for himself. I pushed the unlock button on the keys of my car only when I was right outside of the driver's door. Then I opened the door and hopped in. I locked it immediately after. The man got there just seconds later and tried opening my door. He then started aggressively banging on the window. I started the engine and backed out as fast as possible. I actually backed into my shopping cart, which was laying on the ground still. Then I sped away, leaving the man standing there. When I was out of the parking lot and on the road, I called the police. I reported the whole incident and let them know that the man was still in the parking lot. Unfortunately, all of my groceries were left at the store. There was no way I was going back there, and I had to go shopping again the next day. At the end of the day, though, I'm just happy that the man didn't catch me. I work at a small grocery store. It's a local business in the city where I grew up and still live. In fact, my parents owned the grocery store and started it back in the late 1980s. It was only natural that I worked there, and I've been helping out my whole life, but I've been an official employee since I was 14. I knew a bit of everything. We only have about 12 total employees, so I fill whatever role needs to be done usually. I'm very familiar with the store and can do anything from cashier to stocking shelves to customer service. The store only has 3 check lanes, and they are rarely all open at once. Probably only on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, which are the busiest times. We close at 9 p.m. every day, and one night I found myself working as the only employee. The time was just after 8. I had sent home the other employee at 7:30 and was more than confident that I could handle things for the remainder of the night. When we closed, there were usually several tasks to do, but they didn't take all that long. We rarely got many customers at this time also. I remember that only 2 customers came in the store and bought a couple of items between 8 and 8:30 p.m. Then the store was empty for several minutes. About 8:40 or so, a man walked inside. Now, the store was pretty small for a grocery store, but there's still enough aisles that I can't see everywhere from my check lane. The entrance/exit door is also at the far end and barely in my view. I only really saw the guy out of the corner of my eye as he entered. He seemed to make his way down one of the first aisles, and then I lost track of him. I sat at my check lane to wait for him to shop and then check out. We were still open for about 20 more minutes. During that time, only once I briefly got up to organize one of the nearby shelves. It would have to be done before I left, so I figured I may as well do it now. I didn't really have much else to do. Soon, it was 9 o'clock and we were now closed. I spoke over the intercom of the store announcing the time and that we were closed. I was expecting the man to then walk to the front of the store with his items. I waited about 5 minutes with no sign of him. Then I made another announcement. After a couple of more minutes went by and there was still no sign of the man, I decided to go see where he was. Come to think of it, I hadn't seen him at all since he had walked in. And the store really wasn't that big, so I probably would have seen him, but I hadn't seen him once. I started walking all around the store, up and down the aisles, looking for the guy. I went down each aisle that we had, which didn't really take too long. When I was done, I hadn't seen him. I came to the conclusion that he must have left. Probably when I had been organizing the one particular area. I guess I just hadn't noticed him leaving. Then I went on with my nightly duties. This included cleaning the floors, making sure everything was in order and there were no messes or anything. I would have to get some things ready for the next day as well. I started by going over and locking the doors, which I hadn't done yet. But literally as I was doing that, I heard a noise from somewhere inside the store. It was like somebody walking, but it was at the whole other end. By then, inside was completely sunned, so even though the sound was quiet, it seemed as loud as could be. I finished locking the door and then nervously called out, asking if anybody was there. There was absolutely nobody else who would be there. My parents were both out of town, and I was the only one working. I immediately had the thought that maybe the man hadn't left, but had been hiding inside. Nobody answered me, which made things even worse. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to go look and see who was there. I slowly started walking through the aisles of the store, closer to where I had heard the noises coming from. Each aisle that I went through was empty. The silence and suspense of the situation was killing me. I decided to call out again, sounding more friendly this time. I said, "We're closed right now, so if you have anything to buy, I can ring you up at the front." Still nothing. When I got down the next aisle, I heard noises again. There were footsteps in the very next aisle over from the one I was in, and they were moving down from one end to the other. I kept walking down the aisle, and soon I heard the footsteps get to one end of it. I expected them to move further away, but they started moving towards my eye. By now, I had walked to the far other side of it. I looked over, just as whoever was there came into sight. Then I saw him. It was, in fact, the same man who had entered the store earlier. He was standing there, looking right at me. Then he started walking over to me. At first, I started walking up to the front of the store near the check lanes, thinking maybe the man was going to leave. But then, after only a few feet, the guy started running towards me. He was like sprinting, and it didn't seem like any kind of a joke. The only thing that I could think to do was to run away from the guy. I ran all the way to the front of the store and into a small hallway. We had an employees-only break room, and there was a door that would lock. I got inside and locked the door as fast as possible. I didn't really think the man would try to chase me in there, but he did. He got right outside the door and then tried opening it. And when it didn't open, he started walking away. Still, I wasn't confident that he was leaving the store. I shouted out that I was calling the police and he had better get out of there. Then I dialed 911. As I waited inside for the police to get there, I heard the guy walking around occasionally. He was far away and somewhere inside the store, but after a while, I stopped hearing anything. When the police got there, I went out to meet them, and the man was nowhere to be seen. The police searched the entire store, and the guy was gone. There were a few items off the shelves, and the money from the cash register was stolen. Other than that, things could have been a lot worse. It was only a little over $100 that he got. I'm happy to be okay. Still, I wondered what exactly his plan was. Was he going to try and hurt me? I still work at the grocery store, and nothing remotely close to this has happened since. A few years back, I used to be a manager at a smaller Jewel Osco grocery store. If you don't know, that's a popular grocery store chain in the Chicago area where I'm from. I worked all sorts of hours, whenever I was needed, really. As a manager, I had many different duties as well. One night, I was working in the customer service area. Things were fairly average. A decent amount of customers shopped, but not too busy. I then received a phone call to the store phone, which was somewhat unusual. Sometimes people would call with questions about returns, if we had certain products, or how late we were open, things like that. I answered the phone and asked how I could help. The person calling sounded to be a male, and they spoke in a deep voice. I still remember it like it was yesterday. All the guy said was, "I'm going to get you." I didn't know what he meant by this, and I said, "Excuse me?" The man did not bother to repeat himself, but then hung up the phone. I had no clue what had just happened. I couldn't help but feel creeped out, but after a few moments, I realized it was likely just a prank. Some local teenagers probably thought it would be funny to prank call a grocery store. The voice didn't sound like a teenager's voice, though. It sounded like a grown man, but still, I was sure that it was just a harmless joke, and I went on with my work. Some time went by, and it got later. As it did, the store got quieter and several employees left to go home. I did some tasks around the store and later returned to the customer service area. We closed at midnight, and by now it was probably almost 10 p.m. or so. That's when the phone rang again. I answered it once more, not even remembering the earlier call that I had received. But then I heard the same voice from before. This time they said, "I'm inside the store." I asked who was calling, and they hung up. I knew that it was the same voice, though. There was no mistaking it. Now, I was still thinking that it was a joke, but I had to be a little bit nervous. What if there was a slim chance that they weren't actually joking about this? I looked around from where I was behind the service desk. I saw several customers shopping around the store. How could I know for sure? All I could really do was keep working. More time went by, and soon it was almost time for us to close. At about 11:30, when the store was almost completely empty, there was another phone call. I actually was not by the phone, but when I heard it ringing, I walked over to answer it. When I did, there was nothing on the other end. I asked who was there, but I didn't hear anything in response. Then they hung up on me. I wasn't sure what to make of this, but I figured that it was the same person. We were definitely getting pranked. At least that's what I thought. But then the phone rang yet again. This time, I was annoyed. I picked up the phone and immediately ordered whoever it was to stop calling. I said it was a funny prank at first, but we had work to do and we were running a business here. At first, there was just silence on the other end. Then, the man said my name. He told me to calm down. The guy spoke in the same deep and slow tone. Then he hung up again. I wasn't quite sure how he knew my name, but if he had in fact been here, he might have seen my name tag. I tried my best to shake it off and move on. For the rest of my shift, there wasn't another call on the phone in the store. Only a few of us remained working, and soon it was midnight. We locked up the store, and I had just a couple of things to do before I could go home. I was able to get out and leave by about 12:15 a.m. I walked through the parking lot to my car that was parked in the back. I got inside and started the engine. When I was doing so, my cell phone rang. I looked at it and did not recognize the number. I'm not sure why, but out of curiosity, I chose to answer it. When I did, I once again heard the same voice of the man who had called the store. At first, I thought to myself, not this guy again. When will he stop? Then, I realized that he was not calling the store phone, but my personal cell phone. Now this was seriously weird. The man said, "I'm on my way to your house. See you there." Then the guy hung up. I sat there in my car, shocked. I had no clue how he would have gotten my cell phone number. I was trying to convince myself that this was still some type of joke, so I started driving back to my house. It took me about 10 minutes to get there, and I lived alone. My house was a smaller place in a large neighborhood. It was generally pretty quiet, though. The whole time that I was driving home, I thought to myself, there's no way I would possibly see anybody at my house. Soon, I pulled onto my street. When I did, I actually saw a car parked out in front of my house. This was really strange. There was usually never anybody who parked there. That was my spot where I would typically park my vehicle. I rented my house, and there was a small alley with a garage in the back, but there was no driveway. I did not rent the garage, so I had to park on the street out front. I wasn't sure if this was just a coincidence or if I should be leery of this vehicle parked in my spot. When I got near the car, I slowed down and decided to pass it by. When I did, I looked over. Nobody was inside of it. Could they be in my house or something like that? I decided not to park my car and try to go inside. I just had a really bad feeling about it. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I just wasn't going to take any chances. I drove a little ways forward and then stopped my car. I decided to turn around and I started backing up and turning my wheel. When I did this, my car faced my front yard and house. This exposed what appeared to be a man hiding behind a bush that was right next to my front door. As the headlights of my car shined on him, I stopped and looked to see if that's really what I thought it was. The guy moved, hiding himself further behind the bushes, but then I couldn't really see him anymore. Still, I knew that somebody was there. I finished turning around and then drove out of there and called the police. And just after I had finished talking to the 911 dispatcher, I received another call. Thinking maybe it was the police calling me back, I answered it without looking to see who it was. It was the guy again, and he asked me in a deep voice to come back to my house. He then hung up before I had a chance to say anything. I was going to tell him that I called the police, but looking back, I'm glad I didn't get a chance to. That would have given him time to run away. The police got to my house a while later, and they called me when they were there. Then I drove back. They told me that they had in fact caught a man on my property. I was told that this time he had been hiding behind my house under my small deck that I had. When I finally got a good look at the man, I actually recognized him. He was a former employee of the Jewel Osco that I worked at. This explained why he called the store and how he may have found my personal phone number. And in the time that I had worked there, we had gone through quite a few different employees. I remembered most of them, but I didn't really keep up with him. I later found out that he had been fired. Maybe he thought that I was responsible for his firing, although I wasn't. Maybe he just chose me to target for whatever reason. Either way, this remains as the scariest experience I had while working there.